Well, hello everybody. This is Ron Slodek with Historic Larimer County, and I'm here today with Meg Dunn, also on our board of directors, our secretary, and we're standing in the old trolley barn in downtown Fort Collins, and we came here today to take a look at something really remarkable, a piece of transportation history that Historic Larimer County happens to own, and we are working toward the goal of getting this restored and back out on the road. What I'm referring to is right behind me. We've got the old Poudre school bus, but really it's a wagon. What we have here is a horse-drawn school wagon that was used to transport students from the countryside around LaPorte into town to the Poudre school. This wagon was built in 1913, and we've had a couple of different sources for who built them. Interestingly enough, all this time we've been hearing that they were built by Chris Lund, who was a local blacksmith in LaPorte. But I came across an article just recently that I want to read to you, a very brief article that talks about another possible source that seems very likely for the school wagon. This article is dated October 24th of 1913, and it was published in the Fort Collins Weekly Courier, and here's what it says. The title of the article was "School Wagons Are Here for District 60," and that referred to the Poudre School District in LaPorte. The 6 wagons, there were 6 of them, to be used for conveying the children of the Poudre School District to the new consolidated school arrived here Saturday and were unloaded yesterday. They came from the Delphi Wagon Company in Delphi, Indiana, and cost about $1,200. They will be put into service at once. These wagons are not unlike the wagons used years ago for the conveyance of prisoners from one jail to another. Kind of an interesting concept. They were known then as Christie wagons or Black Marias. They are fitted with side curtains to protect the children from the weather. They didn't have windows originally, but curtains, and the driver is taken care of as well. In other words, the driver sat inside the vehicle along with the children. Now, up until 1913, for the kids to get to school, they had to ride their own horses or walk, or their parents would take them by wagon to the schools that were out in the countryside. But in 1913, the Poudre school opened up, and from what I understand, we have yet to verify this, but the newspapers in 1913 said that the Poudre school was the first one in the state of Colorado to be a consolidated school. In other words, the state was moving at that time towards closing down the little rural one-room schoolhouses wherever possible and bringing kids into newly built, modern, consolidated schools. They called them consolidated because they were consolidating all the little one-room school districts into a single larger district that the kids could be brought to. So the Poudre school was, if not the first, then one of the earliest in the state of Colorado. But now all of a sudden the kids need to be brought into school. And in order to help the parents out, help the families out, the school district purchased 6 of these wagons, and every year they would put out in the newspaper, starting in 1913 in the fall, a request for bids for drivers. So anyone who was interested in taking on the job of driving the kids to and from school with horse teams could bid on the opportunity to do that, and they would get paid by the school district. So let's go take a look a little closer at the wagon. What we have here is what looks kind of like a hybrid between a bus and a wagon, doesn't it? It basically was kind of like a box wagon that they built sides and a roof on. And right now, the wheels are gone, the carriage is gone. We don't know what happened to those. They're long gone. It's just sitting on a mid-20th century, I'd say, trailer with rubber tires. But those are not original to the wagon. It would have had big wagon wheels. And out the front of the wagon was a tongue. This is the tongue that's on the mid-19th century wagon or carriage that it's sitting on, the trailer it's sitting on. But it would have had a tongue sticking out, the horses here, 2 horse teams, and then the driver sat right inside this window in the middle and had the reins coming out this window. The window actually has metal hinges on it, you can see up there. And the window, they were able to open the window a little bit and get the reins out. And this while it may have originally had curtains, the way it's set up right now, those are actual window frames. And we do have a sheet of glass from one of those windows, so we know exactly the thickness and the type of glass that it was. The bus was used from 1913 into the wagon was used from 1913 into the 1920s. And all of the newspaper articles that I've found refer to it really as a wagon, a school wagon. Sometime after that, I don't know exactly when yet, the 20s, 30s, it started to be referred to, I'm sure, as a bus. And what we think happened here was that as it got into the 1920s, all of a sudden motorized trucks were available. And this arch right here that you see on the front of the wagon gives us an indication that it may have been converted, and probably likely was converted, to a motorized vehicle sometime around the 1920s. What they would have done was attached an actual truck to the front of the wagon, taken it off the wagon wheels at that point, and put it onto the back of the flatbed truck, or with a trailer behind the truck that they could move it on. But it looks like they attached the rear of the roof of the truck to this, and the driver would have sat out front here and driven the kids to school.
A peanut sitting on a railroad track, his heart was all a flutter. The train came roaring round a curve, peanut butter. A bald-headed man in a restaurant said, "Waiter, my cocoa's cool." The waiter said, "If your cocoa's cool, put on your hat, you fool." Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. But how in the world can the old folks tell it ain't gonna rain no more?
After World War II, it's very unlikely that
Yeah.
anyone would have used a vehicle like this, because motorized buses were on the market. They were modern, they were efficient, so something like this would have been abandoned probably at that point. It's pretty weathered, and the reason it's so weathered is that this wagon sat outside for many, many years after it was no longer in use. But it basically was abandoned probably by the World War II era, and it sat outside for many, many years and just weathered and weathered and weathered. And eventually it was donated to the Larimer County Historic Alliance, which is now Historic Larimer County, and it was brought inside in the 1990s, put into storage, and it's been sitting here in the trolley barn ever since. So Historic Larimer County is planning to get the school wagon restored and back out on the road. Are we going to use it for transporting students? No. That would be ridiculous. Nobody's going to want to ride in this to go to school. What we would like to do, though, is get it restored and stabilized enough that we can start taking it out to special events in the community, horse-drawn again, and so that we can use it as a vehicle for preservation. We love the idea of getting it back in that kind of condition, restoring a really important piece of northern Colorado transportation history, and using it at community events and other special events, maybe even taking it to schools to show them how kids used to be transported to school. What we've done currently is we have just recently engaged Denver architectural preservation firm, Barb Darden and Bruce Darden, who specialize in architecture and preservation, and they've worked on other vehicles, especially rail cars, in the past. And we have engaged them to complete an assessment of the bus, measured drawings of it, and a plan for its restoration. So once we have that in hand, then we want to get out into the community, among our membership, among any businesses or community organizations, and request some donations so we can get it restored. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take some money. It's going to take some careful planning, but we will get that done, and hopefully within the next year or two, we'll have this thing out on the road and out in public view.
And we think we can get some grant money from
Yes.
History Colorado.
Yes, we are actually applying for grant funding this summer to get the assessment done on the wagon, and beyond that, we'll be requesting additional grant funds, but also donations from the community. other thing that came up, as I mentioned earlier, is that these wagons, some of them may have been fabricated or modified by a blacksmith shop in LaPorte. I've also seen some information saying that there was a blacksmith we know for sure named Chris Lund in LaPorte. And this door here was from bus number 3. This is bus number 1, or wagon number 1, school wagon number 3. And all we have left of this one is the door. And there's a little plaque on here. And if you get it in the right light, you can see that it says, built by Chris Lund and Son, LaPorte, Colorado. That's the blacksmith shop. So we're still trying to solve the mystery as to why wagon number 3 had this tag on it. The door for wagon 1 is different construction altogether. It has no tag. So this may have come from the Delphi Wagon Works in Indiana. It's hard to say. This one, at least the door, right, was made by Chris Lund. But we've got to kind of solve some of these mysteries as we move forward. The other thing I want to do is I want to make sure and thank Bud Frick and the former board of directors of the Historic Fort Collins Development Corporation, which just recently made a sizable donation of over $9,000 to Historic Larimer County, specifically earmarked to help us get the wagon restored and back out on the road. I do want to point out, though, it's going to cost more than the $9,000 they gave us. Sounds like a lot of money, but that's probably only going to get us 1/5 of the way to getting this thing done and fully restored and stabilized. So that's why we need to be looking for additional grants and donations.
So I have a question that people might be wondering the answer to. On this wood, Ron, I mean, there's clearly wood that can't be reused or that's pretty darn messed up. So what happens with that during a restoration?
So we have Barb and Bruce Darden, who are preservation architects. We've also been consulting with Ron Anthony, who is a woodwork expert. He deals a lot with the restoration of historic woodwork. He's taken a preliminary look at the wagon already, and he felt that it really is in restorable condition. It looks pretty bad. It's hard to imagine this wood can be restored. And he, in fact, said that it's possible we may never get it to the point where people can ride in it again, but we're going to do our best to stabilize it. And it's just as with a building. You restore woodwork that is in restorable condition, and if there are parts of the wood that's just too far gone, then in those cases you try to replace it with the same type of wood and the same dimensions as well.
And then this is all going to be put onto a new wagon bed.
Which we'll have to have fabricated, a new carriage.
New carriage.
And new wagon wheels. So we're going to have to go to a wagon maker, and we're going to have to find a wagon maker that can make a new carriage and new wheels that will replicate the originals. And that will be done based upon historic photos that we have, and we'll also have to be looking for historic photos of other wagons, maybe even those made by the Delphi Wagon Works. Mm-hmm. There may be some in existence somewhere in Colorado or in the country where we can find pictures of them and get them replicated.
Tall and lean and slim. No, he wasn't fishing, just teaching the worm to swim. Now I hope I'm not misleading. I've said the same before, that even though your sky's a dog, it ain't gonna rain no more. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more. No.